Hi again. Paul in Ephesus, and John Stott's commentary, The Spirit, the Church, and the World. This is the riot in the city. That is Acts 19, verses 23 to 41. Luke gives his readers a graphic account of the riot, which Demetrius, the silversmith, instigated, and the town clerk skillfully quelled. Perhaps he obtained his information from Aristarchus and or Gaius, who found themselves caught up in the uproar, and later became Paul's and Luke's traveling companions. Henson's presuppositions, he's citing here one of the most outstanding commentaries available on Acts. Henson's presuppositions lead him to find in the story a regular tangle of difficulties. He elaborates 6 of them. But Howard Marshall is right to say that Henson's case disappears under scrutiny. He gives an adequate explanation of each supposed problem. Luke's narrative divides itself naturally into 3 sections relating to the origin, course, and termination of the riot. First, its origin. It was inevitable that sooner or later the kingly authority of Jesus would challenge Diana's evil sway. About that time there arose a great disturbance about the way, and way here, by the way, is capitalized. A silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in no little business for the craftsmen. He called them together, along with the workmen in related trades, and said, "Men, you know we receive a good income from this business. And you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that man-made gods are no gods at all. There is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty." Luke declares that the disturbance arose about the way, the New English Bible puts it, the Christian movement. At root, its cause was neither doctrinal, not ethical, but economic. Demetrius, whom Ramsay called probably master of the guild, or guild of silversmiths for the year, drew the attention of his and other craftsmen to Paul's success in convincing people that man-made gods are no gods at all. In consequence, the sales of silver shrines of Artemis, either miniature models of the temple or statuettes of the goddess, were dwindling, and their affluent lifestyle was threatened. Not that Demetrius played directly on their covetousness, however. He was subtle enough to develop 3 more respectable motives for concern, namely the dangers that their trade would lose its good name, their temple its prestige, and their goddess her divine majesty. Thus, vested interests were disguised as local patriotism, in this case also under the cloak of religious zeal. Demetrius proved to be a skilled rabble-rouser, for the artisans' response was immediate. When they heard this, they were furious and began shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" Soon the whole city was in an uproar. The people seized Gaius and Aristarchus, Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia, and rushed as one man into the theater. Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. Even some of the officials of the province, friends of Paul, sent him a message begging him not to venture into the theater. The assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people did not even know why they were there. The Jews pushed Alexander to the front, and some of the crowd shouted instructions to him. He motioned for silence in order to make a defense before the people. But when they realized he was a Jew, they all shouted in unison for about 2 hours, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." The most impressive ruins of Asia Minor, Ephesus stands dignified and alone in its death. That's what H.V. Morton wrote about the travels of Paul. The excavated site, Stott says, is magnificent. It is easy to visualize the riot. According to the Basin text of verse 28, the infuriated craftsmen went running into the street before they started to shout for Diana. This was probably the Arcadian Way, the main thoroughfare of Ephesus, 11 meters wide, marble paved, and colonnaded, leading from the harbor to the theater. The theater itself, still in a fine state of preservation, nestling at the foot of Mount Pion, and nearly 500 feet in diameter, could accommodate at least 25,000 people. Here the crowd dragged Gaius and Aristarchus, and here Paul, overconfident perhaps in the immunity he believed his Roman citizenship would give him, was prevented from coming by the pleas of both the disciples and by some officials of the province, who were his friends. Luke rightly calls them Asiarchs. These were leading citizens who were prominent members of the Provincial Council of Asia, especially its annual presidents and perhaps ex-presidents, and or the city's deputies who served on it, and or the administrators of the various temples of the imperial cult who were under the charge of high priests appointed by the provincial council. Paul was fortunate to have the friendship and the advice of some of them. By now, confusion reigned in the theater. Some people were shouting this or that, and most of them had no idea why they were there. A diversion was caused when some Jews tried to put forward their spokesman, no doubt in order to disassociate Jews from Christians. But the crowd, who would not have comprehended the distinction, shouted him down, and for 2 hours resumed their chanting of Diana's name. Indeed, this section begins and ends with the hysterical screams, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." That's verses 28 and 34. Henschen is right to comment that, in final analysis, the only thing heathenism can do against Paul is to shout itself hoarse. Luke now describes how the crowd's frenzy was calmed by the city clerk, who was the elected head of the city executive, or the chief administrative assistant, annually elected, of the magistrates. He had a staff of permanent clerks responsible for the paperwork of the city. The city clerk quietened the crowd and said, "Men of Ephesus, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image, which fell from heaven? Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, you ought to be quiet and not do anything rash. You have brought these men here, though they have neither robbed temples nor blasphemed our goddess. If then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a grievance against anybody, the courts are open and there are proconsuls. They can press charges. If there is anything further you want to bring up, it must be settled in a legal assembly. As it is, we are in danger of being charged with rioting because of today's events. In that case, we would not be able to account for this commotion, since there is no reason for it." After he had said this, he dismissed the assembly. This city clerk was evidently a man of high intelligence and of great skill in crowd control. He made 4 points. First, the whole world knows that Ephesus is the garden of Artemis' temple and image. Since this is undeniable, no one is going to deny it, and the cult of Artemis is in no danger. Secondly, these men, Gaius and Aristarchus, are guilty of neither sacrilege, that is, robbing the temple, nor blasphemy, reviling the goddess. They are innocent. Thirdly, Demetrius and his colleagues are familiar with statutory legal procedures. If they have a private grievance, they should bring their case to the proconsular assizes. If, on the other hand, their case is more serious and more public, they should refer it to a legal assembly, the correct technical term for the regular, that is, 3 times a month, official meetings of the demos, or city council. As Dr. Sherwin-White comments, Luke is very well informed about the finer points of municipal institutions at Ephesus in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Fourthly, the citizens of Ephesus are themselves in danger of being charged with civil disorder. If this were to happen, they would not be able to justify themselves. Each of these arguments was cogent. The 4 together were decisive. When the town clerk dismissed the assembly, they went home in a very chastened mood. Luke's purpose in recounting this incident was clearly apologetic or political. He wanted to show that Rome had no case against Christianity in general, or Paul in particular. In Corinth, the proconsul Gallio had refused even to hear the Jews' charge. In Ephesus, the town clerk implied that the opposition was purely emotional, and that the Christians, being innocent, had nothing to fear from duly constituted legal processes. Thus the impartiality of Gallio, the friendship of Asiarchs, and the cool reasonableness of the city clerk combined to give the gospel freedom to continue on its victorious course. Next time, Paul's strategy for urban evangelism. I'll put in a link to a video we did in the Divine Names series. The last video was on the contest between the goddess Artemis and God the Father. So yes, Paul is preaching a different king than Caesar, but he's also preaching a father god, not a goddess. See you next time.